What if I told you the men we worship as noble protectors were walking prisons of flesh and steel, more likely to cook alive inside their armor than die by a hero's blade? Welcome to the day you wouldn't survive. Before sunrise, you're debt-chained to a lord. Before noon, you're suffocating in metal. Before dusk, you're a commodity with a price on your head. This is not legend. It's logistics, sweat, and fear. If you're ready to peel back the myth of chivalry and see the rot beneath the polish, hit subscribe now, because the truth only gets uglier. The morning begins with a sound you'll learn to hate. Iron buckles biting leather rivets, clicking plates, kissing plates. A coffin assembled in pieces. Squires tug and swear, while you hold your breath so they can cinch the gorget tight against your throat. You haven't eaten enough to merit this weight, but honor has a mass all its own. Outside, the mist smells of horse and ash. Inside the helm, you taste yesterday. Legend promised glory at dawn. Reality delivers a headache that feels like an anvil hung behind your eyes. Money is the ghost at every meal. That gleaming harness is not a badge of rank. It's a mortgage that walks. The destrier beneath you eats more than your entire household, and each shoe nailed to his hoof hammers your accounts thinner. Your lord calls it fealty. Your banker calls it interest. Your bones call it fatigue. One bad harvest and noble becomes a polite word for broke. Even your sword has a memory of the pawn shop a shine bought back with favors you'll pay for in bruises. You were told armor makes you invincible. The truth is, it makes you combustible. Heat gathers like a conspiracy inside the plates and sweat runs until it can't. Your breath fogs your vision slit and the air is syrup. You slow down not because you choose to, but because physics chooses for you. Every step turns the inside of the cuirass into a drum that beats your ribs. The first enemy you meet is temperature, and it whiled away the night sharpening itself on your pride. The body keeps its own timetable indifferent to banners and bugles. To relieve yourself, you need hands, not yours, but your servants. The solution is either shame or delay, often both. On the march, privacy means a ditch that already reeks of everyone else's urgency. In a castle, latrines hang over running water that carries the stink away, but never the embarrassment. You learn the art of pretending conversations are armor too, a shield against the fact that chivalry never invented doors. Cleanliness is not a virtue here, resilience is. You change the linen layer beneath your hauberk when it threatens revolt, not when it whispers complaint. Lice are more loyal than most allies and far easier to find. The cure is vinegar lye and faith, but mostly perfume. A cloud you wear like a relic, hoping it persuades noses what it cannot persuade truth. In tapestries, nights smell like roses. In life, they smell like the road, the stable, the forge, and the fear that lives between shoulder blades. Training is choreography with consequences. A blunted lance can still break a collarbone. A practice mace is simply honesty in wood. You circle, you angle, you commit, and your weight betrays you the moment your wrist hesitates. The squire you shouted at learns fast because the ground teaches faster. Every drill is a rehearsal for a crowd that will not care who you are when hooves thunder and dust climbs the sky. You don't learn courage. You lease it one bruise at a time. Noon is the hour the armor begins to speak. It hisses when you move, groans when you bend, and rings like an accusation when you fall. Sunlight turns the helm into an oven, and the taste of iron on your tongue tells you how long you've been breathing your own breath. Water comes warm from a skin and goes out in steam. The world narrows to a slit and a heartbeat. You realize victory is often measured not in ground taken, but in minutes endured without fainting. Then comes sport, which is another word for permission. The lists are painted festival bright, but the ground remembers last year's teeth. The crowd roars because they believe this is safer than war. You know better. A tilt is a loaded coin flip win, and you keep your horse. Lose, and you keep a story you'll retell through broken teeth. Somewhere beyond the banners, a monk sharpens a quill for the chronicle. he will write valor. Your bruises will write interest due. The economy of steel prefers captives to corpses. You ride with your eyes hunting not banners, but purses disguised as crests. A man worth gold is a man you must not kill, and hesitation is its own weapon. The moment you unhorse him, a new warfare begins. Contracts, letters, hostages, oaths, all the paper battles that bleed families dry. You taste victory like copper, and it is the flavor of finance. The ledger is a battlefield too, and it does not bury its dead. Captivity is its own theater. A knight taken alive is both honored guest and chained investment. You may dine well, red salters even walk the courtyard, but every mouthful tastes like debt. Your family sells field silver and sometimes daughters' dowries to buy you back. You smile at your captors because smiles keep you fed, yet at night you wonder if you are feasting toward an execution when the money fails. Some captives grow fond of their jailers. Bonds form in the long months, laughter traded over dice games or shared prayers. Yet tomorrow you may meet the same man in the lists, lances leveled, pretending yesterday's friendship was not stitched together by profit. Chivalry is the art of smiling through betrayal, and captivity is only another tournament where ransom, not reputation, is the prize. Faith hovers like smoke over the camp. The church says your violence is wholly a shortcut past purgatory, straight to heaven's gate. The morning begins with mass, the afternoon with massacre. Priests bless swords, then those swords carve open men whose only sin was loyalty to the wrong banner. You tell yourself God understands. You tell yourself the blood is confession written in red. But sometimes in dreams you hear hymns sung in screams and wake wondering which choir you belong to. For some faith bends, for others it breaks. A few nights retreat into visions, seeing angels where there is only dust, claiming demons stalk their every march. Others drown doubt in cruelty, believing the more savage the strike, the more secure the soul. The contradiction is a rack invisible, stretching minds until they splinter. What peasants call madness, what priests call possession, might simply be trauma by another name. When wages vanish and campaigns end, the armor does not vanish with them. Men trained only for killing improvise new careers. Banditry renamed private war. Roads bristle with tolls manned by steel-clad thugs who call themselves knights, still though their loyalty is only to hunger. Castles abandoned by lords become nests of extortion, where banners fly not for kings but for coin. In this twilight, the line between knight and outlaw is a crease smudged by desperation. Villagers know the truth too well. To them, a night is not salvation, but a storm on horseback. Fields are stripped bare, barns empty, daughters seized as bargaining chips. Complaints rise but vanish at the feet of lords who need their knights more than their peasants. In courtly poems, knights defend the weak. In village gossip, knights are the predators that never leave. Between parchment and plowshare lies the chasm where justice falls. The armor itself becomes a symbol of tyranny. To a farmer, the shining plates are less protection than threat proof that the man inside is beyond consequence. One swing can scatter years of labor. One demand can erase generations. Yet those same plates eat the knight alive, every rivet a debt, every strap a promise he cannot keep. Steel is the costume of authority, and the cage of the actor who wears it. Tournaments return gaudier and crueler. They are fairs of blood where merchants sell relics beside the lists, and children eat sugared almonds while men die in dust. Chroniclers write of ladies fainting at the sight of skulls caved in, of monks gagging as intestines spill onto trampled earth. Yet still the trumpets sound, because for every knight who falls another dreams his family will eat if he risks his ribs. Spectacle is hunger's accomplice. Medicine waits in the wings, but it is no ally. A broken arm means leeches. A crushed chest means prayers. Surgeons are butchers with scalpels cleaned in wine, and the luckiest patient is the one who faints before the blade bites. Bones knit crooked wounds, fester, fevers bloom. When scribes write of knightly courage, they do not mention the screaming behind tent walls or the stench of cauterized flesh that makes strong men vomit. Yet perhaps the deepest wound is silence. The silence of peasants who dare not complain. The silence of squires who obey even as they tighten straps too tight. The silence of wives who wait years for ransom that never comes. And the silence inside the knight himself, who cannot confess that every vow of honor is shackled to debt, every hymn echoes in blood, every triumph tastes of ashes. That silence, more than any sword, kills him slowly. Dawn patrol is less about defense than intimidation. You ride past huts where children scatter and doors slam the iron of your greaves louder than any sermon. To them you are neither hero nor villain, but inevitability, like winter, like famine. The smell of damp straw and fear lingers on your visor, and you learn to breathe through arrogance because breathing through conscience would choke you. In courts, bards polish the image you cannot live. They sing of gallantry of roses tucked into gauntlets of damsels saved from dragons. Yet the dragon is hunger. The damsel is leverage, and the rose is wilted beneath the stink of sweat and steel. You listen to these songs as if they were about someone else, someone whose armor gleamed without rust, whose conscience didn't rattle like a loose buckle. Debt, though invisible, has a weight heavier than mail. A failed harvest, a lost joust, a ransom unpaid, and suddenly the word noble is an echo, not a shield. Creditors write letters sharper than swords, and lords demand service without offering coin. You find yourself praying not for victory, but for vacancy, that no one calls your banner, that no messenger knocks with summons you cannot afford. Even the meals remind you of scarcity. Meat is rare unless stolen bread is dense as stone, and ale is thinner than the patience of your men. You chew not because you hunger, but because rhythm keeps despair away. Across the table, comrades laugh too loudly, their mirth more brittle than their shields. Every swallow tastes of compromise, and you wonder whether honor can fill a stomach or only starve it. Armor corrodes faster than reputation. Rust blossoms like a disease, eating rivets, softening hinges, staining linen with brown ghosts. You polish until your hands ache, but the decay returns patient as poverty. Each flake of rust is a reminder that steel-like loyalty requires constant upkeep, and both are quick to betray if neglected. You begin to see your reflection not in the shine but in the corrosion. Campaign roads are rivers of mud that swallow hooves and patience alike. Rain turns banners limp and vermin nest in saddlebags. Sleep is a ration measured in minutes, stolen between alarms. You share your cloak with lice, your bread with mold, your dreams with dread. The world of tournaments and tapestries feels like a rumor. The reality is blistered feet and prayers for dry straw. Sometimes you envy the peasant's burden. His life may be shorter, but his nights are his own, unchained from a lord's whim. He bends to the plow, not to debt. His children cry from hunger, not from fear of ransom. You, armored and trained, are supposed to be his better. Yet watching him whistle in the fields, you suspect that the word better hides more envy than truth. Violence becomes the language of negotiation. A toll unpaid, a tithe disputed, a glance too bold, all resolved with a mailed fist or a blade drawn half an inch. Words are decoration, steel is punctuation. Even when you don't strike, the threat does. You wonder if the tongue you once spoke of courtesy of piety has been lost beneath the helmet muffled by iron until only violence remains. Night does not bring relief. The armor may come off, but its ghost lingers, pressing on your chest as you try to sleep. Dreams replay the tournament's crunch, the captive's eyes, the priest's blessing that sounded more like a curse. You wake drenched, not in sweat, but in the certainty that tomorrow repeats today, and each repetition sands away another sliver of soul. Chivalry, you realize, is not a code, but a curtain. Behind it stand lords fattened on your debt, priests fattened on your fear, and poets fattened on your lies. You are both actor and audience applauding a performance that kills you slowly. The curtain never falls. It only thickens, muffling the screams until silence becomes the loudest sound in the hall of knighthood. The battlefield is not a stage of glory, but a marketplace of chaos. Horses scream louder than men, arrows buzz like hornets, and the air is a broth of blood and mud. You swing not at enemies, but at shadows, praying your arm remembers the drill when your mind forgets itself. Victory feels less like triumph than survival, and even survival tastes bitter when you count how many debts still wait at home. Fear is the unspoken comrade. No knight admits it yet. Every hand trembles under the gauntlet when the trumpet calls. You hide it with bravado, with laughter that echoes too sharp, with prayers muttered too fast. The bravest knight is not fearless, he is simply the best liar. Courage is a mask strapped tighter than any helmet, and like the helmet it cuts off air. In the clash you seek ransom more than justice. You aim for the wealthy crest, the gilded armor, the horse draped in silk. Killing wastes profit, capturing pays. You knock a man down, bind him, and already calculate the grain, land, or silver he represents. War is less about banners and more about ledgers, and you sworn to honor have become an accountant of flesh. Sometimes you fail. A blow lands wrong, and instead of a living prize, you hold a corpse cooling in your arms. The face behind the visor could have been your cousin, your drinking companion, your mirror. For a moment the battle pauses in your head, and you taste ashes. Then another lance lowers, and you forget the corpse until night when it returns in silence to share your blanket. The church promises indulgence, forgiveness, in exchange for violence performed under holy banners. You whisper confessions while your hands are still stained. Priests tell you the blood of enemies washes whiter than water, and so you march believing each thrust of the sword carves a stairway to heaven. But when you look at the faces of children left orphaned, you wonder if the stairway is built downward instead. Madness grows in the ranks. Some nights hear voices in the night, angels commanding them to kill more demons, whispering that no blood is enough. Others fall into silence, their eyes hollow, their laughter gone. The world calls them cursed, bewitched, touched by devils. But you know they are only mirrors reflecting what happens when men wear steel too long and let the weight grind down the soul. A few abandon faith entirely. They become mercenaries selling swords to the highest bidder, today's ally, tomorrow's foe. Loyalty becomes a coin toss, honor a relic. These free companies swarm across the land like locusts, leaving fields, burned granaries, emptied villages stripped bare. They carry banners painted with wolves and dragons, but the only god they serve is gold. Others dig deeper into cruelty, justifying horrors as sacred duty. They torture prisoners in the name of cleansing sin, burn homes in the name of purification, and call rape a ritual of salvation. They believe themselves saints, even as they become monsters. Chroniclers write of them with awe and disgust, unable to decide whether they are warnings or legends. You watching them feel the ground shifting under your own conscience. When campaigns end, the land itself bears scars. Villages rebuilt with charred timber fields that yield thin harvests, peasants who no longer trust their lords. The knight rides away, but his shadow remains. Children grow up fearing the clang of armor more than thunder, and stories told at firesides are not of dragons slain, but of cousins taken, barns emptied, mothers shamed. The knight becomes not protector but proverb. Beware the man in steel. And still, the myth persists. Poets sing of gallantry. Artists paint saints in armor, and courts applaud the spectacle of honor. The truth lies bleeding in the mud, but the song carries farther than the scream. You polish your breastplate for the next parade, knowing it shines with lies. In the reflection, you see not a hero but a prisoner, bound not by chains, but by centuries of expectation that will outlive your bones. Night marches are the cruelest. The moon hides torches, sputter, and armor turns every step into thunder. You stumble through mud that wants to claim your boots, hearing whispers of ambushes in every bush. Sleep claws at your eyes, but the captain's voice lashes harder. You realize the true enemy is exhaustion, and it kills more knights than arrows ever could. When dawn finally comes, you expect relief, but instead the light reveals the horror. You trampled blind corpses left from skirmishes, horses, gutted peasants hanging as warnings. The stink of iron and decay seeps into your nose and clings. You cannot unsee it. Breakfast is bread that tastes like rot, chewed under banners that pretend this is order, not slaughter. Armor shapes your body like clay. Shoulders bow, knees ache, and spines warp under weight, carried since youth. Every knight past 30 looks older than his father, each wrinkle carved by steel. The promise of protection slowly becomes punishment, and you wonder if your skeleton itself has become another cage, one you'll never step out of alive. The songs of minstrels reach the villages before you do tales of shining champions and noble duels. By the time peasants glimpse you, truth has already been rewritten. They bow not from respect, but from survival, because who contradicts a sword? You ride past smiling banners, knowing the smiles hide curses, whispered when your back turns. At feasts, the illusion is thickest. Platters overflow, goblets spill, and lords toast the glory of their knights. You eat with grease on your fingers, wine on your beard, but the hunger never leaves because you know this meal is built on borrowed coin and stolen labor. Behind the music, behind the laughter, the silence of debt hovers like a phantom at the table's end. Tournaments return not as training, but as theater. The lists shine, armor gleams, and lances lower to cheers. But the ground beneath remembers every body broken before, and soon it remembers again. Knights crash, horses topple, bones splinter. The crowd gasps in delight as if death were another jest. You rise from the dust, bleeding, smiling for the audience, because to show pain is to show weakness, and weakness means ruin. Captivity lurks once more. This time, you are the prize, chained in a cell that smells of mildew and hope. Letters travel across borders begging your release, each stamped with seals more valuable than your breath. You count days by candle drips and wonder if your name still means enough to save you. Sometimes you think ransom is a worse fate than death, because it forces you to live as a commodity waiting for someone else's decision. The church promises absolution again. Indulgences, pilgrimages, rituals designed to wash away the stains no water can touch. You kneel in confession, whisper sins the priest already expects, and walk away lighter, yet inside the weight remains. Every lash of penance is a reminder not of forgiveness, but of how much sin you are expected to commit tomorrow. Peasants whisper stories of cursed knights, men who wander forests at night, armor rattling though no body is inside. They call them ghosts, but you know better. They are memories made flesh, warnings of what happens when steel consumes the soul. You laugh at the tales in daylight, but when darkness falls and your armor hangs empty in the corner, you swear it watches you. And through it all, the system grinds on. Lords still demand, priests still bless, poets still sing. Knights die, peasants starve, widows weep, but the machine of chivalry feeds itself endlessly. You realize you are not a man, but a cog of iron, replaceable, forgettable. The only thing eternal is the myth, and the myth will outlive your suffering. Winter campaigns are punishment disguised as duty. Snow turns mail into ice, and breath fogs until you choke inside the helm. Fires sputter against the wind rations, mold before they thaw. You march because the Lord commands it, but each step feels like betrayal of common sense. The cold does not kill quickly. It kills slowly, gnawing at toes, blackening fingers, whispering that you will not feel spring again. When frostbite takes comrades, the survivors cut boots from flesh, hearing screams that echo louder than any trumpet. Some men weep not for pain, but for shame, because to lose a limb is to lose your worth. A knight without grip cannot grip a lance, and chivalry has no pension for broken tools. Mercy is a word carved on tombstones, not in contracts. In rare moments of peace, you remove the armor and almost feel human. Children dare approach, tugging at your surcoat, eyes wide with awe. You smile, but the smile cracks when you notice their ribs, their bare feet in snow. You hand them crusts of bread, knowing tomorrow you may raid their village under another banner. The contradiction tastes like ash, but you swallow it anyway. Brotherhood is both comfort and curse. Around campfires, knights boast, laugh, sing, and for an hour the world feels less cruel. Yet these same brothers may tomorrow become opponents in a tournament, rivals for ransom, enemies in war. The bond is fragile, spun of circumstance, always one command away from breaking. You learn to love with one eye and distrust with the other. The weapons you wield shape your body into a ledger of scars. A sword leaves calluses, a mace leaves tremors, a lance leaves shoulders that grind with every motion. Your body becomes a manuscript, each scar a sentence, each limp a paragraph. And when you strip for the bath you take once a season, you no longer see yourself, but a chronicle etched in red. Priests speak of glory, but you know glory smells like rot. It reeks from the tournament lists, from the battlefield pits, from the latrines under castle walls. Honor is supposed to shine, but it clings like dirt you cannot wash off. You begin to suspect that glory is nothing more than perfume poured over corpses, a story to sweeten the stench for those who never wore steel. The songs that immortalize knights do not sing of their wives waiting alone, managing estates with empty cupboards. They do not sing of children who forget their fathers' faces. They do not sing of mothers who pawned wedding rings to buy their sons back from ransom. These songs are armor of another kind, hiding sorrow beneath rhyme, turning pain into melody for noble ears. And yet in taverns, peasants whisper the real songs, ballads of knights who robbed, who burned, who ravished, who vanished into shame. These songs are not sung for courts, but for kitchens carried in smoke and ale. They do not travel far, but they last longer than gilded verse because truth clings tighter to memory than lies. You suspect one day your name will join them. Age is the cruelest enemy, for it cannot be slain. Your hair grays, your reflex slows, your debts remain. Lords look to younger men, priests absolve with less enthusiasm, and poets no longer mention you. The armor that once fitted like a second skin now feels like a coffin too small. You fight not for honor anymore, but to delay the moment when the world decides you are obsolete. And when that moment comes, it is silent. No trumpet, no feast, no farewell. A younger knight takes your place. Your debts outlive you, and your bones rot where no song will follow. Chivalry does not remember names, it remembers myths. And you, once the shining defender, become another faceless story of how glory devours its own. The end of service is not freedom, but abandonment. You return home to lands, mortgaged halls empty, and peasants too poor to pay rent. The title of knight is still yours, but it has soured. Villagers bow because they must not, because they believe. You walk through your estate and realize it has become a mausoleum where every stone whispers debts. Nights are longer now. Without armor's weight, you expect rest, but sleep flees. Instead, memories parade the faces of those you captured, the screams of tournaments, the silence of children you left starving. The ghosts do not rattle chains, they rattle conscience, and no priest has prayers sharp enough to cut them away. Rumors outlive bodies. Poets exaggerate your victories, peasants exaggerate your crimes. Somewhere in the middle is the truth you cannot correct. Your name becomes currency in taverns, your deeds twisted into warnings or boasts. You are alive, but your reputation wanders without you building a legend you no longer recognize. Old comrades visit less often. The few who come drink heavily, speaking of past campaigns with laughter that tries too hard. You see the same hollowness in their eyes as in your own. Together you remember, together you regret. And together you realize that what you call brotherhood was only shared survival painted as loyalty. Your body finally collapses under years of steel. Knees buckle, hands tremble, and the scars once worn with pride become chains that refuse to loosen. Every joint aches as if the armor never left. You realize the greatest battle was never against enemies, but against time, and time has won. The church promises heaven, but your doubts are louder than hymns. Can a life of ransom, plunder, and blood truly buy paradise with a few coins and confessions? You kneel one last time, whispering sins you have forgotten how to count. The priest gives absolution, but you feel nothing except the cold certainty that faith was another kind of armor, one that also rusts. In villages, children no longer fear knights, they mock them. Stories of rusted men who cooked alive in their armor become jokes told by firesides. The symbol that once terrified is now entertainment. You who once carried banners now carry the shame of a legacy dismantled by laughter. Death does not come as battle or glory. It comes as fever or rot in the lungs or a wound that never healed. You fade not on the field, but in a bed too narrow, listening to the distant sound of bells that will not toll your name. For all the years you lived as iron, the end is soft, ignoble, forgotten. After burial, the world continues untouched. Another night takes your place. Another banner waves, another song lies to the crowd. The cycle spins, feeding on men like you, grinding them into myth, then into dust. Your grave becomes another stone in a field already crowded. Your story swallowed by the system that birthed and devoured you. And so the truth of knighthood is revealed, not romance, but ruin, not honor, but hunger, not salvation, but silence. The knight was never a hero, only a prisoner wrapped in steel. You would not last 24 hours in his life because no one truly did. The myth survived. The men did not. Remember that when you hear the word chivalry, it is not a code but a curse.